Hi guys, this is Tabi and today I'll be doing a first look at the Azure Dragon and White Tiger of Azur Lane, and Shan and Chang Chun. By the way, apologies in case my voice cracks up or I sound like somebody just died. I'm actually a little bit sick, and so my throat is kind of sore and my voice is not in the best condition, and it's already kind of bad even when I'm normal. So yeah, I apologize in advance, but I figured there's going to be a lot of interest in these two ships right now, so I'm going to go ahead and share my experiences with them. Yeah, so 7 days have passed since the start of the Happy Lunar New Year event, which means that diligent Shikikons out there should be completing the special side event for retrofitting Shan and Chang Chun into super rare missile destroyers. Yeah, that's right. It's actually a new ship type in the game that fires missiles instead of torpedoes. By the way, this is the reason why I never retire my last copy of any event or limited ship, even if they aren't top tier. Let's just say this saved me a lot of headache when the Pamiat retrofit was announced last year, and that was saving me from having to go through all these extra steps to get another copy of Shan and Chang Chun, and then level them up from scratch again. Yeah, it pays to be a loving Shikikon to all your ships. Like your children, you love them equally. At least that's what you try to tell other people. And provided you have enough dock space. Ah yes, oath rings and dock space. That's pretty much all that I use my precious gems for. On that note, let's take a quick look at Shan and Chang Chun. So Shan and Chang Chun are part of the Shan class of Chinese destroyers from Azur Lane's Dragon Emperor faction. The other two would be Fushun and Taiyuan, who make up the four Unbreakables of the Dragon Emperor fleet. At least that's what they call them in English. Now for some trivia. So folks who understand Japanese will be quick to notice that they are actually called the Shiteno in the game's Japanese dialogue. This actually translates to the Four Heavenly Kings, which is typically used as a reference to four Buddhist gods or devas that watch over a direction like north, east, west, and south. So those basically coincide with Bishamon-ten, Jikoku-ten, Komuku-ten, and Zocho-ten. In the case of Azur Lane's four Shan destroyers, however, their group actually represents a different set of four gods or guardians. That would be the four sacred beasts of Chinese mythology. Fortunately, I'm not familiar with their Chinese names, so I'll go with the Japanese names instead, which are Seiryu, the Azure Dragon, Byakko, the White Tiger, Suzaku, the Vermilion Bird, no relation to Larry Bird, and Genbu, the Black Tortoise. This is actually quite obvious when you retrofit both of them based on the two special amulets that they require, their skills, and their animal backgrounds once their retrofit is complete. Hopefully this also means that Fushun and Taiyuan will get a retrofit at some point, maybe even next Chinese New Year, so who knows. Personally, I think it's just nice to see the faction get some diversity and more viable options, besides the classic Great Wall combination of Yatsen, Ninghai, and Pinghai. Anyway, how do you get Shan and Chang Chun? So longtime players were able to acquire Shan as an event reward in past Spring Festival and Lunar New Year events, while Chang Chun was available via limited construction in previous Lunar or Chinese New Year events as well. Now, they weren't exactly top-tier ships, so if you ended up retiring either of them for some reason, well, fear not. You have another chance to get them during this year's Happy Lunar New Year event, which runs from January 27 to February 9. Now, for Shan, all you need to do is finish her drawing book event, which you can access from the bottom of the event tab. Just do missions to stock up on paint pigments and you'll be good to go. In the case of Chang Chun, you will need to go to the General Event tab once again, and then do the Lit Up Area event. You'll then need to collect 1,000 special event points by clearing limited time missions, and you will earn a special item ticket that can be exchanged for one of 7 ships. Just make sure to pick Chang Chun if you don't have her yet. So now that you have Shan and Chang Chun, how do you turn them into missile destroyers? Well, you can do that by going to the Retrofit tab, but first you are going to need a couple of special items. So go to the General Event tab once again and pick the special event A New Era, A New Power. By doing 7 daily tasks each, or 14 total from the event, you will acquire 2 retrofit items. So in the case of Shan, you will need a Dragon Emperor amulet known as the Seal of the Azure Dragon. And then for Chang Chun, it would be the Seal of the White Tiger. Wasn't that like a band in the 80s? Anyway, once you acquire these 2 items, just head to the dock and click on each character, and then click their Retrofit tab. By the way, Shan and Chang Chun must be level 90 in order to fully retrofit them. In addition to their individual retrofit items, you will also need the following materials and resources for each ship. So for each of them, you will need 35,800 gold, 11 T1 destroyer blueprints, 14 T2 destroyer blueprints, 5 T3 destroyer blueprints, 30 T3 main gun purple plates, and then either one extra Shan or Chang Chun, or just use purple bullets. Yeah, so go through their retrofit tree and congratulations, you now have the first missile destroyers in Azur Lane. Now Shan and Chang Chun will lose the ability to equip torpedoes, but in exchange, they can now use missiles. Guided missiles. They've also gained some new retrofit skills. In the case of Shan, her red skill, Azure Dragon's Dance, provides 1 missile strike charge, decreases burn duration by 3 seconds, and decreases burn damage by 15%. It also lets her fire a special barrage that inflicts armor break status for 6 seconds to foes that get hit. In the case of Chang Chun, her White Tiger's Prance red skill basically does the same thing at the beginning, so it provides 1 missile strike charge, decreases burn duration by 3 seconds, and also decreases burn damage by 15%. It also lets her fire a special barrage every 15 seconds, but unlike Shan, the effect for this skill is to increase the torpedo damage taken by an enemy by 8% for 6 seconds. By the way, missile damage actually counts as torpedo damage, so this works well with Shan and Chang Chun's missiles as well. Then you have Shan's yellow skill, Shan Nameship Plus, which increases the accuracy, firepower, and torpedo stats of an Shan class ship by 25% and their evasion stats by 10%, so it applies to all Shan ships in your fleet. Chang Chun's yellow skill, Mutual Assistance Plus, meanwhile, has a lower percentage buff overall, but applies to a wider range of ships, buffing not just Dragon Emperor ships but also Northern Parliament ships. This means that she actually synergizes really well with both Chinese and Russian fleets. For the Vanguard, the buff is an extra 12% increase to their firepower, reload, and accuracy stat. It also grants a 12% buff to the Backline's firepower, torpedo, and anti-air stat, which means she can buff her own missile damage as well when she is placed in the Backline. Yeah, that's right, Shan and Chang Chun can be placed either in your Frontline fleet or your Backline fleet, depending on your needs. In fact, even their all-out assault skill changes depending on their position. So when placed in the Frontline, both ships will fire a full barrage every time their gun is fired 16 times. And then when placed in the Backline, both ships will fire a full barrage every time they fire a missile strike. Now, in case you're wondering how to switch fleet modes for Shan and Chang Chun, all you need to do is go to the retrofit tree and click on the last box on the top right. This box is what you use to switch either ship from Vanguard mode to main fleet mode and then vice versa. All you need to do is spend 200 coins and then click on that square and voila! You can now switch the fleet position of either ship to the front line or back line. Just make sure that the ships are not saved in one of your preset fleets before you make the change, or you'll get a warning and then the switch won't go through. Now, when in Vanguard mode, you use your guns as your main weapon, and then your missiles as your secondary weapon, kinda like a torpedo, and then your anti-air guns as your third weapon per usual. Having Shan and Chang Chun in the front line is actually pretty fun, especially when you're using a fast-firing gun, as they'll frequently be serving barrages that work well against enemy mobs. It's actually funny if you put both of them in the front at the exact level with similar equipment, since their attacks sometimes end up meshing, and then your barrages end up looking like a synchronized cluster of colorful shots from everywhere. I'm still not quite sure how well Shan and Chang Chun do for bossing from the Vanguard position, since both of my missile destroyers were just under or around level 100 when I was testing them, so I haven't had a chance to use them against higher level bosses. The missiles, however, appear to have high damage potential, especially against light and medium armor enemies. They fire automatically in Vanguard mode, so they can't be triggered manually, but they move very fast once fired. The missile actually shoots in 2 waves, and so the first one has a velocity of 8, and then the second wave has a velocity of 14. In comparison, the fastest torpedoes have a speed of 4. So yeah, they're much faster than torpedoes. The guided missiles fired by Shan and Chang Chun from the Vanguard position are also highly accurate and can hit bosses even from way across the other side of the screen, so you pretty much don't have to worry about missing them. In main fleet mode, your missiles will be your main weapon and act like a battleship main gun. You can aim it manually and even get the same 20% damage bonus when aimed manually like a battleship main gun would. And then the weapon that was the main gun in Vanguard mode actually kind of turns into like a battleship secondary gun almost. So this is important to note when you're considering what auxiliary gear to use later on. So just keep that in mind. And then your anti-air gun, on the other hand, will still act like, well, an anti-air gun. So not much of a change with that one. Using Shan or Chang Chun as a backline ship also grants them a preloaded missile strike, which is like the missile version of the preloaded main gun of battleships like Jean Bar. On top of that, they get a health bonus, which is about 50% more HP, and they also get improved defense by reducing the damage that they receive. And then last but not least is the fact that they also get the same carrier mechanic as far as being hidden from enemies at first. So it's like the hidden carrier mechanic, which means they remain invisible to enemies unless they get revealed by an airstrike, or if the enemy vanguard gets close. Like carriers, being hidden also gives them a damage increase, which I think is about 15%, which is certainly good to have. By the way, the hidden mechanic is also important because their HP is pretty low, even with the backline HP boost that they get. And I'm talking like bottom tier light carrier HP low, like Hosho. Yeah, that bad. It's really low, at least from my testing so far. So because of that, you want to keep them hidden as long as possible, since they can melt like tissue paper if they're revealed and then get focused on by the enemy. Also, switching Shan and Chang Chun to the main fleet position will decrease their evasion. It's also important to keep in mind that the missiles are actually based off the torpedo stat as opposed to the firepower stat. So kind of like torpedoes, but their armor damage modifiers are actually the reverse of torpedoes. And by that I mean that while torpedoes have an armor damage modifier of 80, 100, and then 130 against light, medium, and heavy armor respectively, guided missiles have a modifier of 130, 110, and then 80 against light, medium, and heavy armor. So as a result, they are excellent against light armor ships like destroyers and light cruisers, and they also still do well against medium armor foes like most heavy cruisers, carriers, and battle cruisers, but they aren't as effective against heavy armor enemies like battleships. Now it's time for my gear recommendations. Once again, note that these are based off my preliminary thoughts and observations, but I think they should still hold up pretty well at higher levels of play. So at the top of the list is the SY-1 anti-ship missile, which is the only guided missile available at this point in the game, and is definitely a must-have for both Shan and Chang Chun once they are retrofitted. After all, it basically defines their playstyle. So the anti-ship missile can be acquired in two ways. One is by taking part in the Joint Battle Mystery Investigation. So this is also known as the quote-unquote an exercise gone slightly wrong event with Bremerton, and this is a server-wide joint battle which rewards participants with one SY-1 missile after certain community goals are met. This event has an easy, normal, hard, and EX version, which means that you can take part whether you're a new player or somebody who's been playing for a long time. It runs concurrently with the Shan and Chang Chun Retrofit event, so that's going to be from January 27 to February 9. The other and more permanent way to get the missiles is through the Core Data Shop. Yeah, so you can get an SY-1 missile for 800 core points at the store. And like with everything else, the Core Data Shop's inventory refreshes after each month, so you can also get a second SY-1 missile here in case you're not able to get the reward missile for some reason. And then for your main gun, I recommend one that fires fast when using Shan or Chang Chun in Vanguard mode, so that way you can trigger their skills more quickly and then more often. At the same time, Shan and Chang Chun also have one of the highest firepower stats among destroyers once you retrofit them, so you will also want to pick a gun that does good damage as well. This means that the fast-firing Blue Rarity 76mm gun is not a good choice. So you know, the gun that you can use for Ayanami, for example? Yeah, that's not a good choice in this case. Instead, my top picks would be the Gold Twin 130mm B2LM Tashkent gun from the Russian events, or the Gold Twin 114mm Mark IV from the Series 3 research. Both fire pretty quickly while dishing out great damage against light and medium armor enemies. And then for heavy armor enemies, this one's a bit slower, but you can use the Gold Single 138.6 MLE 1929 naval gun, which is also known as the French baguette gun. Unlike the previous two, which are normal guns, this one fires HE ammo, so it can inflict burn. And then for a solid non-event gun that's easier to get, I recommend the Gold Twin 100mm Type 98 high angle gun, which you can acquire from T2 and T3 Sakura Tech boxes, as well as the Gear Lab. In fact, this is actually what I mostly used in the video, since I didn't want to constantly swap out the Tashkent gun from the ships I'm currently using for like high-level missions in Operation Siren. So yeah, I was a bit lazy, so I just slapped this gun instead. And then if you're a new player, the purple version of this gun is also a good poverty option. Now for an AP, or armor piercing option, the twin 128mm 45 SKC from the Gear Lab works well, and would probably be my first choice when using your missile destroyers in the backline as well, since the gun can pierce through multiple rushing enemies. So in case you just want to slap a gun that you can use both for the Vanguard or backline roles. And then for the AA gun, both ships actually have poor anti-air stats, so I recommend sticking a fast-firing AA gun to speed up your fleet's overall anti-air performance instead. At the top of the list is the gold triple 25mm Type 96 AT from the Gear Lab. And if you don't have that for some reason, or can't make it, the next best option is the twin 40mm Bofors Type 5 gun from Series 2 Research. Otherwise, you can also use the anti-air gun that looks like a bucket, the gold twin 37mm MLE 1936 gun, which also comes from Series 2 Research. And then for poverty options, you can use fast purple guns like maybe the twin 20mm or the triple 25mm. Or if you want a more balanced purple option, you can use the quad 40mm Bofors. Now as far as aux equipment or auxiliary equipment, I recommend mixing and matching one of these three items. So that would be the Seal of the Four Gods, the Type 93 Pure Oxygen Torpedo or Rainbow Torpedo Aux, and then the Repair Toolkit. So the Seal of the Four Gods can be bought for 800 core data points at the core data shop, and this one boosts the main gun damage of Anshan class ships by 16% and also improves their all-out assault, which is especially useful when playing your Anshan missile destroyers in the Vanguard. You can see a difference in the spread of their barrage, for example, when you don't have the seal equipped and then when you have it on. And then the Rainbow Torpedo can be purchased from the core data shop as well, but it costs a lot more, so a whopping 1,500 core data points. This one raises your missile damage and can be used for both frontline and backline positions, so it's also a good thing to have. And then the last one is the Purple Repair Toolkit, which gives your ship 500 more extra HP and also lets them recover 1% of their health every 15 seconds. This gives your missile destroyer more survivability, especially when they're in the front line. This one's pretty easy to get, so it doesn't take long before you're like swimming in a bunch of them. Now, as far as the gear combinations, when you're using Anshan or Chang Chun in the Vanguard role, I recommend using the Seal of the Four Gods for sure, and then pairing it with either the Repair Toolkit if you need more survivability, or the Oxygen Torpedo if you want more damage from your missiles. My preference is to use the Seal with the Oxygen Torpedo for the beefed up gun damage and missile damage. So like having the best of both worlds, as far as damage potential. And then when using either ship in the back line, my recommendation is to just go ahead and use 2 oxygen torpedoes in order to beef up the damage from your missiles, since that is your main attacking option, and your main gun is kind of reduced to a secondary role. When I tried using them with the Seal and no oxygen torpedoes, for example, their damage just dropped significantly from the back line. Here are some examples of their damage without double torps and with double rainbow torps. Yeah, so as you can see, the damage boost is pretty significant. So I would stick with just putting 2 rainbow torpedoes. Anyway, there you go, my first look at the game's first missile destroyers, the retrofit versions of Anshan and Chang Chun. So, how are you liking the ship so far? Personally, it's always nice to see new mechanics, and I also happen to be a big fan of like Byakko. Yeah, so any version of Byakko, whether it's anime or Super Robot Wars, I just love that like white tiger look. So I especially like the design for Chang Chun. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. Once again, this is Tabi Asobi, and thank you for watching.
妹たちの前でいいところを見せたい時だってたまにはなんでも